Hello everybody and welcome to another edition of the Human Physiology video tutorials with me, Dr. Amir Sandhu. Now in today's episode we're actually going to cover the importance of resistance training and why it might be used in athletic populations and also in people in the community for improving general functional ability. So let's get straight into it. So the purpose of resistance training, or what resistance training actually is to move your body against a fixed load. Okay, so there's something which is causing resistance to our movement. Okay, now that resistance could be dumbbells, it could be machines that we find in the gym, it could be elastic bands, or it could be your own body weight as well. So there's a number of different exercises that might illustrate a resistance against a particular load. So it's moving your body against a fixed load, and that provides a mechanical stimulus to the muscles, to the connective tissue and to the bone to adapt. And those adaptations occur over a number of weeks to months and also over years as well if the training is prolonged. So we're moving our body against a fixed load. So that's one of the most important things. Now, in terms of what we get from resistance training, so if I put in here again, resistance training. So in general, the general benefits of resistance training include increased muscle mass and strength. Okay, so we have an increase in our muscle mass because we have hypertrophy of our muscle fibers, and I'll talk more about that in a subsequent video, but we get an increase in muscle mass and then we're able to produce more force. Okay, so we have stronger muscles. Now, resistance training also prevents or reduces the risk of injury as well. Okay, so injury prevention. So it prevents injuries because if we've got strong muscles, then we know that the muscles are supporting our joints, and it means that when we perform a movement, the joint remains stable. Okay, and it's very important to work all of the muscle groups equally. So if you target one muscle group, you're also targeting the opposing muscle group. So for example, if you work on your biceps, it's also important to do your triceps, to work on your triceps. Similarly with the quadriceps and the hamstrings in the legs. So it's very important that the muscles are able to work together to keep the joint stable, particularly when you're performing movements, dynamic movements. So resistance training has a major role in preventing the occurrence of injuries. Of course, resistance training also increases the integrity of connective tissue, so connective tissue integrity. Okay, so what do we mean by that? So there is research evidence to suggest that individuals who undergo resistance training have thicker cartilage or have adaptations to the cartilage within the joint. But of course you're also going to get improvements, you're going to get stronger tendons, stronger ligaments, and that's obviously going to make sure that the joint is stable and is working effectively. So you do get an increase in connective tissue integrity as well. And of course some benefits that you might get in athletic populations. Some of these transfer across, so you get an increase in muscle mass and strength, but of course you've got increased applicability of that force because you're not only stronger, but you're also developing the coordination. So when you're doing resistance training, you're doing multiple movements which are improving the electrical signal which is sent to the muscle, and obviously you have better coordination of your movement of the body. So when you're able to apply that force, you're able to do so in a very specific manner. Okay, so you have increased applicability of force, and of course an example of that is actually Jonathan Edwards in the 1995 World Athletics Championships in Germany. He performed the triple jump, and I think it was something along the lines of 18.43 meters, 60 feet was the jump, and that was a world record then and it's still the world record today in 2017. So that was a phenomenal achievement back then, and it was attributed to a strength training program that Jonathan Edwards was actually undergoing, and it's helped in his triple jump form, his stride, his technique, and the power in which he was able to propel himself to make such a large jump. So that's an example of an athlete using strength training in their sport to have a performance gain. Okay, so going back to just to some of the general benefits, then we've also got increased bone mineral density. Okay, now our bone mineral density reserves peak in around about our mid-20s, okay, and then we start to see a drop with each decade of our life, till eventually, as we get older, our bone mineral density is quite low. And in some people, we then have an increased risk of osteoporosis. The bones become brittle, and they're more likely to fracture if they have trauma. Okay. Now, if you do resistance training, because you're putting a mechanical load through the bone is adapting, and the bone mineral density reserves are increasing, which means that as you go through your age, because you've got such a big reserve to start with, as you get older and older, you've still got a lot remaining. So although it decreases with age, you have a lot more bone mineral density as you get older, and this obviously reduces your risk of having a fracture, and this bone mineral density loss is more pronounced in females because when they undergo the menopause, they lose the protective effects of estrogen. Now, estrogen normally inhibits the activity of these cells called osteoclasts. Okay, now osteoclasts are involved in bone resorption. Okay. And conversely, we have osteoblasts, which are involved in bone deposition. Now, whilst females have the production of estrogen, they continue to have a greater bone deposition relative to bone resorption. But obviously, when you lose the protective effects of estrogen, then it favours this process here of bone resorption. So females tend to have a greater risk of developing osteoporosis and fractures as they get older. So obviously it's more important for females to maintain resistance training or incorporate resistance training into any training routines that they might do. So bone mineral density is obviously a very important one. Of course, the other benefit of resistance training is better neuromuscular coordination. Let's see if we can fit this onto here. So better neuromuscular coordination. Of course, when you're performing a movement using your muscles, particularly when it's strength training and it's relying upon the sense of force and heaviness, the brain is able to store the motor programs necessary and then is able to give the required force to perform that particular movement. So it's obviously very important for neuromuscular coordination. What do we mean by that? We mean balance. We mean posture. Okay, so all of the things that we kind of take for granted, our muscles are actually involved, and strength training helps to enhance that. So, you know, one of the things with resistance training is that you can actually feel your muscle moving under load. So it gives you a better appreciation of how your body performs even when you're resting. Now, in terms of the balance and the posture, of course, when you start a structured resistance training program, you often work the muscles of the whole body. And that allows you to have better control over your particular movements or your posture as well. So you're able to control the contractions or feel the contractions of different parts of your body, and that helps you to maintain a good posture. And in relation to the spine, obviously that's very important to make sure that the spine is always in the correct alignment, whether you're standing or sitting, and it's supported by the muscle. So these are some of the things obviously that we've got here. Now, one other thing which I think is very important to mention in relation to resistance training that we've touched on in terms of the balance and the posture, but extends beyond some of these things here, is the fact that it also reduces the risk of coronary heart disease. So if I put this on here, reduced risk of coronary heart disease, because first of all, you have more LBM, lean body mass, okay? Now, let's talk about what lean body mass is, and before I do that, let's just wipe some of this stuff away here, just to make a bit more space, okay? Now, essentially, with resistance training, if you have an increased amount of lean body mass, okay, then you're going to have reduced amounts of fat, increased amounts of muscle. That's the long and short of it. Now, muscle is much more metabolically active than fat, okay? So this is a metabolically active tissue. What does that actually mean? It means that when you're at rest, if you've got greater lean body mass, you're consuming more calories at rest than if you had the same height and weight, but you had mainly fat and less muscle. Okay, so the muscle is always consuming calories, and that's good because it means that whatever you're consuming gets burned up much more than if you only had fat. So your resting metabolic rate is greater if you've got an increased amount of muscle mass. So you also have increased RMR, resting metabolic rate, and that obviously contributes to promoting a negative energy expenditure. Now, this will obviously prevent you from becoming overweight and obese, which in itself are coronary heart disease risk factors. But of course, there are studies that are showing that resistance training has positive effects on the heart and the vasculature of the heart, and can reduce blood pressure, for example, also reduce the risk of diabetes and other things which attack our blood vessels and cause damage to our blood vessels. So hopefully you can see from some of the things that we've gone through some important benefits of resistance training, and of course all of these benefits we've talked about here do also apply to athletic populations as well. But of course the most important aspect for athletic populations is the ability to use strength training specifically for your particular sport. So to do specific exercises, specific types of training which will allow you to translate the functional benefits that you get into improving your performance. So that's all I need to say in this video at the moment. Please look out for more videos on topics related to resistance training and the adaptations that occur, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you.